This is a database of nutritional information. A database organizes information into rows and columns, a row being what's referred to as a record, and a column being referred to as what's a field. So we can compare a field like calcium across multiple things like apple pie and apricot nectar and so forth. And we can see the values and so forth there and how the values change relative to the various different records. Now, to make a spreadsheet into a database, the most important thing you need to do is to freeze the category headers. So for example, if I was to scroll with my mouse down here, you'll notice that those quick headers just quickly disappeared. I don't want that. In addition, if I were to sort this right here, if I'll say sort from A to Z, bingo, they disappear there too because alpha characters follow numeric characters. So what we want to do instead is we want to freeze an entire row by going to View, Freeze, one row. And since the names of the records are also, we want those to stay put, we can go View, Freeze, one column. And now we'll notice that what's happening is that both categories there are going to stay put. And so I can scroll this way and the record titles stay put. If I scroll this way, the field titles stay put. And so one thing that's helpful is to start coloring different sections of the database as you see fit. So for example, if I wanted to distinguish this to make sure it's clear to see, rather than just using the gray as I selected right here, I might choose, let's say, a medium blue, and or maybe something a little bit less dark like that. So now we have a little bit lighter blue, and then we can change the font color as well. So now we have our foods as distinguished from our fields, which is the various different nutritional components of those. So one of the things that databases are very good at is sorting information. So you're going to be dealing with a couple different scenarios where you're going to try to look at diet as it pertains to trying to avoid atherosclerosis or osteoporosis. So we're going to try to minimize the risk of those by doing a analysis of the content of those foods. So, for example, calcium is going to be necessary to try to prevent osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is just the weakening of the bones. So if I look over here, we can look at a normal bone. Here we look at an osteoporotic bone right here. These bones are much more fragile. This tends to happen in postmenopausal women more than in other portions of the population. But we can avoid that by having food which is high in calcium content. That's moderate to low protein content. Protein can sometimes inhibit the calcium uptake. And having a calcium phosphorus ratio of approximately 1:1. So as we go back and we look at our data right here, we can see, well, how can we find foods that are high in calcium? So we can click on this first category and say Z to A, meaning high to low, and we can see that ice cream is really high in those components. And so we could select for a food which is going to be along a particular criteria. For this purpose right here, we're going to put in a tool known as a filter. So we're going to click over here under data. It's actually under data, it's called create filter, but it is a tool. And I'm going to apply it now to calcium. So I'm going to say that I want all of my foods in my diet, or at least to select for tools that I might accentuate in my diet, to be higher than, let's say, 120 milligrams per serving size. So I click on this and say, what I'd like to do is I'd like to filter by condition, where I'd like it to be, the value to be greater than or equal to 120 milligrams of calcium. When I click OK, this database has now been changed. And so we can see this, it stops right down here at 122 because it doesn't contain any foods that don't meet that criteria. So that filter implies that we have some kind of a criteria. So again, if you're looking at osteoporosis, we're looking for foods that have a moderate to low protein content. Again, protein somehow interferes with calcium uptake. And so we're going to look over here and we're going to try to find some kind of category with protein. Now here's a category with protein, but it's over to the right of the table. I'm just going to move this over here So my protein is next to my calcium. In fact, maybe just to the right of it, so that I can see the sequence of what I've done. I've filtered by calcium. I now need to filter by protein. So I have to first say, okay, what's really, considered a high value versus a low value and so forth. Well, here, I might just use the top arrow here, which allows me to sort. And so I can do sort from high to low, and I can say, well, it looks like, certain things that, values maybe over 10 might be too high of protein for our particular field and our search. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to say, I'd like to select for, on another conditions, we want to say that that the calcium here is going to be, let's say, greater than or equal to 10. All right. Now, once again, we have two filters in place here. We have the calcium filter and the protein filter. And so we're looking at foods here that might meet some of the criteria for trying to reduce the threat of osteoporosis. So we look back over here and say, oh, how about a calcium to phosphorus ratio of approximately 1:1? Calcium and phosphorus interact, and if the ratios are too out of whack, then apparently it's going to reduce the uptake. So I don't see phosphorus here, so I'm going to scroll across here and see if phosphorus is in my section. And we go across here, and sure enough, phosphorus is here. So I'm just going to click on that category header there, the R, drag that all the way across. I'm going to put that right next to calcium. And now I want to create a row here, a column, I should say, where it expresses the calcium to phosphorus ratio. And here we use some of the spreadsheet capabilities of Google Sheets or Excel or any other program that's similar. So I'm going to insert a column to the right. Okay, I use the insert column to the right. And I'm going to call this one here in terms of the header. I'll just open that up so you can see that. I'm going to click on that. I'd like to call that calcium : phosphorus. So we're looking at the calcium to phosphorus ratio. So here we have calcium in milligrams, phosphorus in milligrams. So I'm going to say equals calcium, all right, divided by the phosphorus. And now that's going to be the ratio. So the ratio is 0.45. Well, I'm going to reduce down the decimals because that's a little more detail than I need and more precision than I need for sure. And so now I'm going to take that, and since the formula is already there, I can drag it down by clicking on that little blue box. And now we can see the ratios as they apply all the way to the various different foods. So let's assume we were looking for something with a ratio pretty close to 1. I'm going to say on this thing that a ratio here of anything which is greater than, let's say, 0.7 and less than 1.3. So now I'm going to apply the filter once again. I'm going to say here, now I want something which is between things. So I'm going to filter by another condition. And this time I'm going to use the condition which is between. So I'll say is going to be between, is between a value of 0.7 and 1.3. And then when we click OK, it limits our foods again to just those values where the calcium to phosphorus ratio fits that thing. So if you're trying to prevent osteoporosis, eat custard and breadcrumbs, okay? Well, obviously, this is not a dietary recommendation. The best thing is probably to take calcium supplements and to take vitamin E to help absorb that. But we can see by doing this little quick analysis here, we can see the value of how we can sort information in a database, how we can create new columns that express various ratios, and how we can use filters to look for the specific data of interest.